What's up, grinders? So in today's video, I'm going to talk about how I accidentally became a tutor for the rich. Now, this is not a flex in any way, shape, or form. This entire thing was kind of like just the random accumulation of occurrences all happening at the perfect time in my life. So the story started many eons ago when Evildea decided to start learning Chinese, primarily so he could understand the conspiracy that was underway between his wife and his mother-in-law. I started learning Chinese, and at first I was doing like maybe 1 hour a day type of thing, and then after 6 months, my wife randomly sends me a message because she was out with dinner with her friends, and she said, "Oh, I just signed you up to a Chinese language speaking competition." And I'm like, "What do you mean you signed me up? What competition are you talking about?" And she's like, "Oh, it's called like the Chinese Bridge or something." I was like, "What is this?" And I remember I went and Googled it, and apparently it's a competition that happens once a year for the elite of the elite within the country who can speak Chinese. May I repeat, the elite of the elite? I'd been learning for 6 months at this stage, 1 hour a day. Little to say, I instantly shit a brick, and I was like, "When's this competition happening? And why did you sign me up?" And she's like, "Oh, it's happening in like 2 weeks. Because if you win or you get second place, they fly you to China so we can get basically a free holiday." And I was like, "Yeah, but that's based on the fact that I win. I can barely speak this language. All I can say is that I'm hungry and where is the toilet? And you expect me to win this thing?" And she's like, "You'll be fine. You love languages. You just put a few extra hours in. That doesn't really matter. You never know. You also are an actor, so you could probably pull something off." I was like having heart palpitations by this stage. I didn't know how to say no because they'd already put my name into the list, and her friend was actually like apparently one of the spokespeople at the event, and she's like, "Yeah, this will be great. Evildea will love it," type of thing. So I was like, what can I do? So I started preparing because we had to speak for like 5 minutes. There's no way I could speak for 5 minutes of Chinese at that stage. All I knew is that I had to make that the smallest amount possible. So I made a recording of myself where I was speaking about the fact that I need to think up a really cool idea for this competition, as if it was God speaking down on me. And then I had a few lines that I actually spoke on the day reacting to this speech. I had no idea what the speech was actually saying. Like, I couldn't recognize the words, but I did manage to make it happen. Now, when I rocked up on the day, and there's actually some clips of this competition on my YouTube channel. It's like I think I took part in the Chinese Bridge competition or something like that. Anyway, when I took part on the day, I was wearing like the traditional Chinese clothes. I rocked up at the event. I was shaking. Like, I was kind of like scared at this point because like everything I'd seen online was that this is for the best of the best type of thing. And I remember I walked into a room and there was like 11 others there. Everyone spoke Chinese amazingly. And even if they didn't, my Chinese level was so crap that I would believe that they spoke amazingly. And the first test they gave us was a written test. And I looked at it and I went, "I know that means I." And I basically just put smiley faces everywhere because I didn't know how to respond. And I was like, "Well, I failed already." That's that one out of the way. But apparently that's not actually a very big component of it. Even though they required like you to do this like test and stuff, they weren't actually too worried about that for some reason or another. I don't know why. But then came the actual competition. And a couple of the people who went up and did the competition, these people, they were like, I'm pretty sure they were almost natives. Like, they'd grown up in a bilingual family, so they were completely fluent. But at the same time, everyone who did like some type of performance, they were really shite. Like, it was almost like they were standing there doing a monologue. And I was a trained actor and I was actually acting at the time, so I knew how to put on a really good performance, even though I didn't know how to say anything really. And I remember after my performance, the judges could ask you questions. I guessed my way through like half the questions and pretty much just responded with shit, bullshit, bullshit to like everything. It was so shockingly bad, and my wife is in the audience like filming it going like this type of thing. I hate her to this day for that. Anyway, after the competition was over, I was like, "Oh, I'm so glad that's over. I'll never have to hear about this again." Apparently, somehow, I don't know how, I honestly don't know how, I ended up getting 4th place in this competition. Thank God, because apparently 1st and 2nd they flew to China, and if one of those couldn't go to China on the specified date, they'd go to the next person level. I was so scared that they would call me and tell me I'm going, okay? Remember, 1 hour a day for 6 months. There's no way in hell I would survive in China doing this competition. So I didn't go. That was the end of it. At least I thought it was the end of it. And this is where the actual story begins. Because apparently that wife of a friend type of thing, she recorded it, and somehow the recording got around, and it ended up in the hands, I guess, of some really rich Chinese businessman who had just landed here in Australia. At the time, I was an actor, so when you're an actor, you make shite money. Like, only 1% of actors actually make a living. I was making, like, nothing at this stage. So he contacted my wife and said, I'm looking for a tutor for my son to teach English. And he was very interested in me because I knew a little bit of Chinese, and also I was very entertaining. And my wife's like, oh, okay. And I was doing some tutoring at the time, mainly like an hour here, an hour there for different people, just to make up some money type of thing. And I remember she was like, okay, where do we meet up? Like, did you want to do like a free practice lesson or something? He's like, no, we can pay for the first lesson. That's fine. And I remember I rocked up at this it was like this building that really didn't have much in it. It was like mainly empty office space. And we went up to this one floor. And in there, it was like this big round table. And the guy at the back of the room, he gets up. He was like wearing a business suit. He was like actually quite a cool guy type of thing. And he spoke English, but his English was terrible. It was like really broken, but at least it was like kind of understandable type of thing. I remember we shook hands and he's like, oh, this is my son. His son was sitting there and he's like, do a lesson. And then he went and sat down at this conference table, and I'm standing at the back of the conference table with his son there, and I'm like, okay. And I'd been teaching Esperanto at this stage for years. So I just like did an Esperanto lesson, but in English type of thing. I started using all sorts of like methodologies and combining them, like grind methodologies with like, some comprehensible input style stuff and direct methods and things like that. And I was teaching him literally about the contents of the room. And at first the businessman was kind of like on his phone. He wasn't paying much attention. And then after a bit, he put down his phone and he actually started watching. And then I was getting the son at one point to start swapping out words type of thing with a sentence. And like, I'd say, it's on the table. And then I'd pick it up and I'd say, it's on the chair. And then I'd go back to the kid, where is it? And the kid would be like, it's on the chair. And he would like repeat. And he had a pretty good pronunciation already at this stage. So he'd obviously been learning English in China. And after a while, the businessman, once we'd done our 1 hour, he got up and he was like, that was pretty good. Gave me a shake of the hand and I went. And I figured that was literally the end of it, because there was nothing amazing said. But then a few days later, he contacted my wife because apparently he was testing a bunch of teachers for his son. He contacted me, his wife, and he's like, I want him to come in and teach English to my son as basically a full-time job. And I was an actor at this stage, and I was doing some part-time IT type of stuff, and I was looking actually kind of to get out of acting and to move into programming. But I still had like a bunch of jobs that I was kind of committed to at this stage that I couldn't really just like go do full-time. And I was like, full-time? Like, what is that? Like, does he mean like 2 hours a day type of thing? No, it turned out that he wanted to do a minimum of 8 hours a day for the year. I was like, 8 hours a day? Are you serious? I would literally have to drop every other job. And my wife is like, well, he's got all these other jobs. And then she started talking me up saying, I was working in IT and all this stuff, not mentioning the fact that I'd kind of moved out of IT and I was in acting at this stage. So my salary was like really low. In fact, as an actor, you don't get a salary. You just kind of get like money here and there type of thing. And the guy was like, oh, how much does he make? Then she gave him a estimate based on what I was making when I was a sysadmin in IT. So it was quite a bit. The guy's like, I need him kind of to start right away. And then he basically doubled what I made as a sysadmin, thus giving me the most money I have ever made, in my life for a job type of thing. When he said double, I was like, what? So like, we're going to get like payroll type of thing? Like, how's that work? Am I going to work for your company or something? And the guy's like, no. What we'll do is I'll just give you a lump sum payment right up front and that should cover you for the year. And I was like, what? Screw all these other jobs. I'm doing this type of thing. So I instantly, of course, naturally signed up. My wife was more than happy to provide bank account details and it landed. We got the whole lot, the lump sum. But then this is where it gets interesting. I would end up going to his place in the morning at 9 a.m. like any other job, but it was at his home. And his son, before I rocked up, was doing like at-home schoolwork. And then when I rocked up, we would basically do what I did during the interview process where I'd be using a direct method with a kind of comprehensible input style methodology with a lot of grinding, basically swapping out nouns and verbs. And his dad would sit there in the back of the room, I think programming. I'm pretty sure he was like a very high level programmer somewhere. But he would sit there and he'd listen in and he would stop me every now and then and he'd say, that sentence, what did you just say? And I'd be like, and then I'd remember the sentence. He's like, do that one again. Keep swapping out the nouns, the verbs, these types of things. And this is where it really started to cement in that, this is like a really good methodology. I'd used it up to this point, but I hadn't really like used it hardcore. But here I was having to do it for hours on end. But by the end of this year, this kid's level of English was insane. Because when you think about it, I was doing more than 2,000 hours of work with this one kid. And his English just went whoomp right up, because obviously kids learn fast as it is. But by the end of the year, he sounded like a native. And I remember when he went back to China, I used all that money to basically fund my entire way through programming school in a way. And then even while I was in programming school, my name got bounced around in China, and I ended up doing online tutoring for a bunch of other kids, for other like well-off families. And even to this day, every now and then I do a little bit here and there, although it's not really my focus anymore. But I thought it was like a super weird experience, and kind of shows how I ended up teaching in the first place. And finally, it proved to me one thing overall, that there is no silver bullet for learning a language. It literally comes down to grinding in some form with a massive amount of hours. That's all it is. How you do it does not matter. You just got to do a lot of hours of some form of grind. So that's it. If you guys have enjoyed the video, let me know in the comments, and I'll see you all in the next video. And don't forget to sub, or I will find you wherever you are, and I'll make you grind.